hearing, City Council of Pearland for Monday, June 12th, 2017. The hearing tonight is for public hearing ANNX 17-0001, the possible annexation of Massey Ranch. And with that information in the record, we'll let staff review.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. This is the first of two public hearings requests on behalf of the property owner for the possible annexation of 212-acre property entitled Massey Ranch, located within the city's ETJ. Massey Ranch is generally located approximately 2,900 feet east of FM 1128 at the southwest corner of the intersection of McKeever, CR 100, and Harkey Road. This site is also the location of a portion of the proposed Massey Oaks planned development, which will be heard at a later time. The image shown here shows the property that's being proposed to be rezoned, the 212 acres, which is labeled Massey Ranch. This image shows the notification buffer of the 200 notification buffer of the individuals who were notified of the property. It also shows the zoning, the current zoning, which is the ETJ, and the city limits. Pertinent to Chapter 43 of the Local Government Code, upon annexation, the city is required to create a service plan for annexation. Services provided following annexation are zoning, police protection, fire protection, emergency medical services, solid waste collection, operation and maintenance of drainage facilities, operation and maintenance of streets, including lighting, operation and maintenance of parks, playgrounds, and swimming pools, animal control, code enforcement, and health services. This is the annexation schedule. Notice of intent was mailed out on May 8, 2017. The legal notice was advertised in the paper the week of May 31st for the first public hearing, and was advertised the week of June 7th for the second public hearing. Tonight's the first public hearing, which is June 12th. The second one is June 19th. The first ordinance reading will be July 10th, and the second ordinance reading is July 24th. Mr. Mayor, that concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Okay. Moving in our agenda to item number 4, citizen comments. Are there any citizen comments from the citizens at this public hearing? Let's move the, we're supposed to have a presentation on this.
No, sir, what you received from Jay would be the staff presentation. If there's any questions or thoughts for this first hearing, we're open to that.
Okay. Moving in our agenda then to item number 5, since there were no citizen comments. I think most of you remember the public hearing we've had on this, on the public and the civil discussions. Moving in our agenda, I'll ask Councilman Carbone to comment system.
Thank you, Mayor. Since this is before us and the applicant's here, if they could give us an update on where we're at with the school zone.
Good evening, Ron Cobb, 275 Hill Street. Coincidentally, we had a meeting with Dr. Gilcrease this afternoon with Alvin School District. It went very well, and we have a meeting with Dr. Kelly on Thursday with Pearland School District. And so we, based on our meeting today and the feedback we've had from Pearland to date, we do believe we will have a memo of understanding, I guess it would be, by well before the July 24th meeting. As you all know, there's a process that can take 6 to 12 months pretty easy to get it all de-annexed and annexed, but we will have a memo of understanding on the resolution signed by both superintendents, of which so far one of them has indicated that he is authorized to do. And so we feel we're going to have a resolution and move that forward so we have a good, solid plan.
Great, thank you.
Appreciate those comments. Thank you, sir. Now that I've got the microphone working, you can at least hear what I'm trying to say. Moving to item 4, as we go through the process, I'd like for the council to enter into the record any comments you have, starting with Councilmember Carbone at this point.
I'm good, Mayor, thank you.
Okay, Councilmember Reed?
No comment, Mayor.
Councilmember
No comment, Mayor.
Little?
No comment, Mayor.
Perez?
I'm okay, Mayor, thank you.
Okay. I'd like to have staff make comments appropriate at this point.
There being no other questions, we'll be prepared to have the second public hearing and then proceed as was outlined, so nothing else.
Super, super. Does the council have any further comment or questions at this point? Does staff have any further comments at this point? Hearing none, I'm going to move down to item 6 as adjourned. We will adjourn this at 6:07. And thank all of you for being here for this particular meeting, but we do have a regular council meeting started at 6:30 if you're looking for something to do. Ladies and gentlemen, let me open a regular meeting of City Council of City of Pearland for Monday, June the 12th, year 2017. If you'll please rise, we'll have an invocation tonight by Councilmember Derek Reed, and Chief Spires will lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Everyone, please bow their heads. Dear Lord, thank you for waking us all up this morning, Lord. Thank you for bringing us here today. Please watch over the decisions that this body makes today. And most of all, Lord, please make sure that these decisions are made in your name. Please watch over our men and women that serve our country, Lord, and men and women that protect the streets of Pearland. And please just continue to bless our city. Please watch over everyone as they leave this place tonight. And just please continue to be in our lives. These blessings I ask and thank you for in your Son, Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
Of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state, under God, one and indivisible.
I want to express our appreciation for all of you being here tonight. It's always wonderful to see a number of our citizens in the audience. And I'd like to take an opportunity to recognize all of the young citizens that are sitting in the middle there. They are from the government class at Pearland Independent School District, Turner College. And they're in the government class, and they are here to find out more about our Texas government. So they started with our city council. Now, I hope you leave with a good impression. And I'd like to ask each of you from the Turner College to please stand. Let's take a look at who you are and give you a chance to say hello to us. Would you please stand, all of you? Thank you so much. I appreciate you being here. I think it's wonderful to have a government class come in with a group that is conducting government, which is what it is. It's local government, but it is the government of our city. And we're very delighted for you to be here tonight and find out a little bit about what goes on in your city. Because one day you may be sitting up here as well, or in a higher location. And I know that when you go to Turner College, you're just they keep telling me that's a cut above the regular. So I'm impressed with so many fine young people here tonight, so thank you. Moving in our agenda to item number 3, which is roll call. All of our council members here except for Councilmember Keith Ardno, who is on vacation. And I asked him if he was going to Disney World. He said, no, I don't have to go down there to go to Disney World. We do this every day here in Pearland, so this is good. Moving in our agenda further to item number 4, citizen to be heard. This is an opportunity for you to step forward. If you fill out one of these forms, step up to the podium and give us your name and your address. And we'd like to extend about 3 minutes to you to express the concern or the message that you have. So starting off with DF Road, when Larry Marcotte is going to start our process here, and thank you for being here tonight, sir.
Larry Marcotte, 3606 Inverness Court. I'm here to talk about Dixie Farm Road. First off, I'd like to congratulate you, Mayor, and Mr. Owens in your winning the election. But Dixie Farm Road, you've just approved next to Home Depot a potential for business to go in on that piece of property on next to Home Depot. Right now, we're taking 5, maybe 7 cars when you're going from Dixie Farm across past Jack in the Box. We just don't have time, and the cars keep backing up. The other 3 directions all have more time than what we have. going that way. It's got to be repaired, and if there's more business going in along there, it's going to be a problem, a bigger problem, and more accidents. So we've got to see if we can't work it out ourselves or with TxDOT in making some better connections so we can move more traffic. Because ambulances and fire trucks are going to have problems getting through there just because of how crowded those two streets are. So please take a look at that. Thank you.
Good. Appreciate those comments. Thank you so much. Next citizens is Mr. Gallagher. Andrew, there he is. And thank you for being here today.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I hope you realize.
Would you give us your name and address for the purpose of record?
7711 South Meadow Drive in Houston.
Okay, thank you.
I just want to speak to you about professional qualifications of project managers, and I wanted to let you know that I held this back till after the election. I just wanted to speak about something that happened to me many years ago that's been stuck in my craw. Back in 2000, I interviewed for a job as projects director in the City of Pearland. There was only 2 people in the interview process. It was myself, Alan Mueller, and a guy named Joe Wirtz. And lo and behold, Joe Wirtz was selected for the job. I never, ever got over that. And I just wanted to let you guys know that I, checked on Joe Wirtz's qualifications, and they were nowhere near my qualifications. Wirtz, this is quoting from a Klotz Associates handout. Wirtz received a Bachelor of Science in Environmental Studies from Southwest University. If you read that sentence, you might think he got a degree from Southwest University in Georgetown, Texas. But no, that's not true. His Southwest University is a diploma mill in Kenner, Louisiana. And so I worked here. I could not believe that the personnel department didn't flush out that a person had a degree from a diploma mill. The other thing I learned about Mr. Wirtz is he had a bankruptcy discharge September 14th, 2010 in Pearland, Texas. So I'm just saying that the person who beat me out for that job, and it was a sort of a phony type of interview process, never should have ever worked for you guys. And the biggest thing is, I know Joe used to be down here, but organizing a PowerPoint presentation is in no way anywhere close to real professional engineering standards or a real professional engineer with a license. I had a license. I had 27 years of professional experience. My college in New Jersey is one of the very competitive college, Newark College of Engineering, very competitive. The other thing I was noticing, there's a lot of publicity about Councilmember Owens. It talks about him working for an engineering company. I wonder about that with your bond program, because to my knowledge, I don't think Mr. Owens is a registered professional engineer. And the other thing is that, I'm just saying that if you really want to do things right, you ought to hire the best person with the most qualifications who actually had a professional engineer's license back in 2000 when this happened. This was under Bill Eisen and under Alan Mueller. The other thing that was a problem for me was that Mr. Mueller couldn't even coordinate the move of the departments from one building to the other. I had a knee operation on a Friday, and I came in on Monday, and my office was not moved. I had to move my own office on a bum knee that I had surgery on a Friday. Mr. Mueller did not even have the common decency to apologize for that. And I heard reports that his children were playing in the offices and had locked my office, and that's why my materials were not moved over to the library. So I just want to inform the mayor and inform the personnel department about things like this. But going forward, I'm a retired guy. I don't want any business from the city of Pearland. I'm just here to tell you something, to right a wrong, and drain the swamp. I just don't know if there is much of a swamp, but there was a swamp back in 2000, and I was a victim of it. And thanks, Mayor and Council. You may think I'm a disgruntled person, but I'm smiling now and finished at the end. But it's something that you ought to investigate. There is no way a person with a degree from a diploma mill who's not even a registered professional engineer should be able to beat out a real, true professional engineer for a job. Thank you.
Good. I appreciate those comments. Thank you very much. Moving in our agenda to item number 5, which is the consent agenda. I'll ask Councilmember Carbone if he'll present the consent agenda for our consideration.
Thank you, Mayor. Consideration and possible action, approval of consent agenda items A through E. So moved.
Second.
Are there any items to be removed from the consent agenda at this point? We have items A through G. Is there any questions, comments from the council on this? Hearing none, we do have motion second on the floor, Mr. Secretary.
Councilmember Carbone?
Aye.
Councilmember Reed?
Aye.
Councilmember Moore?
Aye.
Councilmember Little?
Aye.
Councilmember Perez?
Aye.
Motion passed 5-0 with Councilmember Ordino absent from the chambers.
Okay. Moving in our agenda to item number 6 on our, which is a couple pages over for you. New business, item number 1, Councilmember Reed, would you present this for our consideration?
Thank you, Mayor. Consideration and possible action, first reading of ordinance number 1537, so moved.
Second.
A motion and a second. We're in discussion. Staff report.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Council. Tonight we have 3 separate financing agenda items. First one dealing with our water and sewer utility system. Second dealing with our permanent general obligation bonds, and third with certificates of obligation. Going to try to introduce these together. Cynthia Pearson, our finance director, will give you an overview and then kick that over to our financial advisors for comments.
Okay. We're now ready for staff report, and I appreciate.
Thank you, Mr. Pearson. The fiscal year 2017 budget included issuing a total of $54 million in bonds for various projects in the adopted capital improvement program. City Council approved a notice of intent to reimburse from bond proceeds on November 28th of 2016. Tonight, we're moving forward with the debt issuances and are going to review the financing plans with you. In addition to that, today's market allows us the opportunity to refinance some existing debt to take advantage of lower interest rates and realize some significant savings. I'll do a brief introduction and then turn it over to Mr. Robert Upton, our Director of Engineering and Capital Projects. He will provide you with an overview of each project included in this issuance. Joining us tonight is Mr. John Roebuck with BOKF, the city's financial advisor. He will be presenting directly after Mr. Upton. Mr. Roebuck will review the upcoming schedule of events and the impact to our tax rate. At that time, he'll be happy to answer any questions you may have. Also joining us is Tanya Fisher, representing Andrews Kurth, our bond counsel, who will also be happy to answer any questions you might have. Just a brief overview, general obligation bonds are voted bonds, and you usually vote those in during a bond election, and our last election was in 2007. GO bonds are secured by property taxes and were required by law to levy a tax rate to pay for those bonds. We also have certificates of obligations that are not voted. However, they require public notice of intent to issue, and they're subject to voter petition. They are secured by property taxes, and we are also required by law to levy a tax rate to pay for those certificates of obligation. The third type of financing that we have tonight is water and sewer revenue bonds. Revenue bonds are secured by net system revenues, and the pledge is strengthened by the bondholder covenants. And at this time, Mr. Upton will review the actual projects with you.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. As you can tell up there, we have quite a few projects. We have about 4 slides to go through, and I'll try to quickly go through each of them. But as Ms. Pearson had said, brief description of each of these projects. The southeast quadrant of Old Town Drainage, this is a drainage project from Walnut Street, from right around the edge of 35 to Old Alvin, and then down Old Alvin to Mary's Creek. Corrigan Ditch is the improvements along Wagon Trail and Cantu area. The Parks Bonds portions was Independence Park Phase 1. As we saw, we had a kickoff for that just about a week and a half ago, and staff is out moving and removing items, getting ready for us to bring our contractor in when those bids come in. The Dolores Fenwick Nature Project, that'll be a new building out by the JHEC area, and we are currently reviewing competitive sealed proposals by the contractors that came in last week. Street bonds, Old Alvin Road widening from Plum to McCard. This is a project that also ties in Linwood, Old Alvin as well, and also Orange Street around the service center. We'll be doing water and drainage projects in there and then widening the road. Makawa Road widening, this is a partnership with TxDOT. TxDOT is currently reviewing our consultants' cost estimates right now to do the work and their proposal. We're waiting for those responses to come back so we can move forward with that project. Max Road expansion, this project is getting ready to be on the street for bidding, and this will be extending a 4-lane road from the extension of Reed Boulevard up to Hughes Ranch Road. Then McCard Road extension, this is from Makawa to Cullen Parkway. We are in the middle of finishing up our FONSI for environmental, and we'll be out beginning to procure the right-of-way over the next year, and then construction after that. And this is also a partnership with TxDOT. And then finally, Smith Ranch Road, the extension from Hughes Ranch Road to Broadway, and this will convert us from a 2-lane road to a 4-lane road, tying into where the toll road will dump in to Hughes Ranch Road as well. Those are all GOs, our general obligation bonds. With certificates of obligation, we have several projects here as well. Independence Park Phase 1 is a portion of that, which we already talked about. Green Tea Terrace Trail. This is a trail that will come along Clear Creek, heading from the area of Broadway right around Lowe's, all the way up towards Hughes Road over there. The City Hall renovation complex, we talked a lot about that, and see the activities ongoing right now. Fire Station 1, we finished up the design and submitting it for final permit review and be out on the street shortly for looking forward to a contractor to build that. Then 288 from our northbound frontage road. This is kind of an exciting project that we're trying to work with TxDOT on as well, and this will create a frontage road from County Road 59 all the way up to FM 18 to 518, and this will help provide maybe some relief on 288 and provide that side road or that frontage road that'll help us out. And we're in negotiations with them right now to do some modeling with TxDOT that'll help us move that project forward. Then heading over to our next slide is revenue bonds. Dealing, as Ms. Pearson talked about, with water and sewer funds. We have the 521 water line. This will provide us a loop connection up 521. That'll connect a water line all the way up to our water tanks up there at at FM 2234 and 521. We have a water line, of course, as we're putting in a McCard Road. That extension will also be putting in water and sewer, so this complements that so we can have a transmission main from one side of the city to the other in an east-west corridor. Hughes Ranch Road is also another water line. We're in there expanding that road to a 4-lane road as part of the TIP-funded project, but we have some old water that needs to be relocated and moved out of the way, and so this will upgrade our water line. The additional ground storage tank at the same water plant at 521 and 2234. We need as much storage as we can, so this will add to that. Then the other two are continuing program projects, as we say, where we will find underground piping infrastructures at our water plants, our booster plants, need to be replaced. So therefore, we'll go in and upgrade and replace those as they wear out. And the transite pipe water line project is to upgrade those old infrastructure to PVC and change that over. And then a continuation of these same revenue bonds. Reflection Bay wastewater plant is ongoing. The McCard Road trunk sewer main, that is the same thing as we talked about with McCard Road and also with the water line on McCard Road. This is all infrastructure that needs to be in place, and these are trunk mains. Barry Rose wastewater treatment plant expansion. This is taking the early stages of our design and concept and performing a preliminary engineering report to help guide us through the process of our design. We have the Makawa lift stations, as we talked about, as we widen Makawa Road with TxDOT funds. This also needs to move some lift stations out of the way, but we're also able to remove a lift station, convert to some gravity, and do some improvements. Green T1 to Riverstone. This project is finalizing design. We'll be going out on the street very shortly, and this is to remove a lift station and convert some areas to gravity and also improve a lift station. Lift station program, this is continuing. For example, over here on Liberty, right out here, right out front of City Hall, we have a lift station that's being rehabilitated. That falls under this program. Then sanitary sewer rehab, that is as we find older and infrastructure that is beyond its useful life, we'll pipe burst it, or we'll CIPP, or what we call cure in place pipe, or fully replace it if necessary. And then finally, Independence Park Lift Station, as we talked about, this is an opportunity to remove this lift station during the park rehab projects and convert to gravity. And that completes everything that I have associated with these projects, and I'd like to turn it over to John, our FA, and have him answer any other further questions you may have in this refunding program.
Thank you. Thank you.
Mayor, council members, John Roebuck. I've got a little presentation I'll put on the board here. Just give me a second to figure out this technology. There we go. Well, to summarize those projects, now I'm here to, I guess, find ways to fund them. And we're gonna, like Cynthia pointed out, we've got 3 different bond issues we're looking at. We're looking at a permanent improvement bond issue, a certificate of obligation, and also a water and sewer bond issue. And as Cynthia mentioned, we have an opportunity to refund some bonds for some savings, which I'll go through tonight, on both the GO side and also on the water and sewer. Both of them are significant savings given the marketplace. On the first page, this is our current market review. This is an overview of the bond market. Again, this is kind of an average across the United States of municipal bonds. The red line there represents the revenue index, and the blue line there is a general obligation index. Currently, we did this presentation last week, so we get an agenda packet, but Thursday night, this rate comes out, and the new rates actually dropped lower than what we're showing here. The GO index is actually at 3.53%, and the revenue index is at 3.7%. So lower than what we're showing on the chart here. And we're still a little way off from the lows, but we're well below the historical average. So we've got a chance with these interest rates to save some money and also finance the projects that were just discussed for lower interest rates. First, I'm going to go through the refunding bonds. We took the current market rates, looked at all of your debt to find out what bond issues by maturity have a greater than 3% present value savings and actually have a negative ARB of less than 50%. Then we tried to lower it down to almost 35% given the 2-year call provisions we looked at. The result was 5 bond issues, series of bonds, with a total of $36.5 million in bonds. And based on the savings, saved the city $3.4 million in savings, almost $3.5 million, which is a savings percentage of about 9.53%. On these first 2 pages, we're showing the savings percentage there in yellow and then the negative ARB percentage. Negative ARB is the opportunity cost of refunding these bonds prior to the call date. As you get closer to the call date, savings sometimes increases, but also we don't know what rates are going to do between now and the call date. So take advantage of the rates as you can, take the savings off the table, and get the refunding and save the money for taxpayers. And then on the next page, this is the way it would look from your debt service perspective. Starting from the left to right, you have your current total debt service requirement as it is today for your general obligation debt. And then the proposed bonds for refund there is in the 3rd column, refunding bonds. And then the next 2 columns are the proposed new issue portion that we'd issue to refund these bonds. We'd issue about $33.5 million to refund those refunding bonds. And then there on the far right is the savings. If you'll notice, the first 3 years is minimal savings, about $50,000 or so in savings. That's a result of us not refunding any bonds in those maturity in those years. The maturities we're refunding start in 2021, all the way out to 2034. And so for that 14 years, we're looking at about $237,000 a year in savings. Any questions on the refunding?
Sounds pretty good so far.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Thank you.
And then on page 5, this is the estimated debt service requirements for the new money portion. Again, starting from left to right, the current debt service requirements of the city. Now, this column includes the estimated results of the refunding, and then the principal, interest, and total, the new money portion of the 17 permanent improvement bonds. And on the far right's the resulting debt service requirements based on these estimated rates. We did run this at current market, and we ran it at the 20-year level principal structure that the city has indicated in the past that they like and prefer. And by selling $21.4 million, we generate the $24,245,000 in proceeds needed to fund those projects we just discussed. And then on page 6 is the estimated sources and uses. We broke it out by the two different portions, the refunding and new money portion. For the refunding portion on the left, again, we're issuing $33,465,000 in bonds. We believe, based on the current market, we're going to generate some premium of about $4.8 million, which will cover the cost of issuance and then also help fund the escrow. And by doing that, we can generate proceeds of $38.8 million, which is needed to fund the escrow to defease those refunded bonds of $36.5 million. Again, the savings is about almost $3.5 million, and the savings percentage is 9.5%. On the new money portion, we're going to issue, again, $21.4 million to generate $24,245,000 in projects. And then they're highlighting yellow across both columns is the estimated all-cost interest rate. Again, based on today's rates, we believe we can sell the refunding portion for about 3.26%. And again, that includes issuance costs. And then for the new money portion, we believe we can sell for 3.284%. And again, that includes issuance costs also. Any questions on the journal, the PIBs?
I think we're still with you here.
Lot of stuff to go through. And then on page 7 is the estimated debt service requirements for the certificates of obligation. Again, at 20-year level principal debt structure. We believe we can sell in current market $5.7 million to generate $6,455,000 in proceeds needed for the projects. The column, the current total debt service requirements in the far left includes the proposed new money and refunding permanent improvement bonds, and then the principal, interest, and total as you go from left to right, and then resulting total debt service requirements on the far right. We also did a source and uses on the certificates of obligation. Again, issuing $5,735,000 bonds. We believe will generate premium of about $815,000 or $16,000 premium. And the total proceeds is $6,455,000 that would be delivered to the city at closing. Again, the estimated all-cost interest rate is at 3.367%. And then water and sewer. We did the same thing on the water and sewer system. We took the current market water and sewer rates, applied it to all of the series of bonds the city has outstanding, and we came up with 4 series of bonds that make economic sense to refund. Those are the 2006, 2007, 2008, 2009 series of bonds. Again, all of them have greater than 3% PV savings and have less than 50% negative R. I will point out that 2006, 7, and 8 bond issues, as you recall, have a surety policy associated with them, meaning at the time we sold the bonds, we bought basically an insurance policy from an insurance company that guaranteed the reserve fund requirement that we have to satisfy within the bond covenants of the city. We looked at this last year and we had a couple different options that we were looking to take those out because they do generate savings. But based on the rates now, we believe we can refund these and generate some savings and still fund that reserve fund, which I'll show you in just a few slides. We are looking to refund again at almost $51.5 million in refunding bonds, and the savings is going to be $9.2 million or 17.89% savings percentage. That's on this page here. Estimated savings debt service requirements for the water and sewer bonds, left to right, current debt service requirements there on the far left, less the bonds to be refunded, second column, and then plus the refunded portion of the water and sewer bonds, they're fourth and fifth columns. And then that's estimated savings there's on the right. You'll notice that we have a large savings in the first 6 years, and I'll get to the reason why we're doing that here in just a second. But then the next 2 columns are the new money portion. We're issuing $14,900,000 in bonds for the new money portion to generate proceeds of $16,910,000 to basically fund the projects we talked about earlier. And this is why we have the structured savings up front that's a little higher than the rest. Again, this is the same exact table, current debt service, far left, refunded bonds, plus the combined new money and refunding bond issued there in the middle columns. So the estimated savings, again, is $9.2 million. But again, because we have a surety policy on 3 of those bond issues we're looking to refund, we have to find cash reserve to basically satisfy the reserve fund requirement for the bonds we're issuing to refund those. We're also refunding 2009, which already has a cash reserve of about $915,000, so we can transfer that over when we refund these bonds to the new reserve fund requirement. And so we'll have to fund about $3.5 million in reserve fund. And that's indicated there in the green column there in the middle. Remember, we fund this over basically a 5-year period over 60 months, equal payments. So we're looking at about $715,000 a year. And in doing so, it actually keeps the savings level of about $255,000, $260,000 a year for the refunded bond issues. So even after we pay the reserve fund requirement out of that savings we're showing here, we're still showing $5.6 million of savings, or basically 10.9% present value savings. Does that make sense?
Good. Makes sense.
And then estimated source and uses. Again, this is based on the total deal, not taking out the reserve fund. The reserve fund will be taken out after you close the bond issue from the realized savings. But $45.5 million of refunded bonds to generate proceeds of $52.9 million, which will be used to fund an escrow to pay off $51.490 in bonds. All cost interest rate is at 2.944% on the refunding. Now, new money, again, issuing $14.9 million in bonds to generate $16.9 million for the construction fund of the water and sewer projects. And those, all cost interest rate on there is 3.233%. And then for the schedule of events, really the first major date there bolded in blue is tonight. Tonight we're asking you to authorize a notice of intent to issue the certificates of obligation. We are required to post notice in the paper for 2 consecutive weeks, at least 30 days prior to selling the bonds. And we're also doing the first reading for our parameter ordinances for the permanent improvement refunding bonds and also the water and sewer revenue and refunding bonds. We'll publish those notices on June 15th and then again on June 22nd to satisfy the requirement for the certificates of obligation. And then we'll be back out here on the 26th for the second reading for the parameter ordinances and ask you to adopt those parameters. And then we'll actually sell the bonds hopefully the week of the 17th, given the market and what conditions are like during that week. If not, we can go later, we can go sooner. But with that parameter, as long as we hit those parameters, we can sell when the market's right. And the parameters basically are dictated by the amount of bonds we can issue and also the savings percentage on the bonds. And we're actually asking you all to approve a parameter the next meeting of 5% of the present value savings. I know our threshold is 3, but because these are so high, we're going to ask for 5 so we can take advantage of those savings. And then we'll actually come back to you on August 14th to sell the certificates of obligation. We'll sell them at a separate sale because those do not have a parameter, so we have to sell those during a meeting date. We'll close the permanent improvement and refunding bonds and the water and sewer bonds on Thursday, August 17th, and then close certificates of obligation on Thursday, September 7th. And with that, a lot of numbers, a lot of dates, a lot of information. I'll be happy to answer your questions.
Good. That was a good presentation. And your presentation covers items 1, 2, and new business items 1, 2, and 3. We realize that, and with different portions of that covered in each one of those 3 new business items. Council, have any question or comment at this point? Councilmember Carbone.
Thank you, Mayor. If you go back to, I believe, your slide number 4, the GO refunding.
Yes, sir.
When we look at that principal, the amount column that varies, are we restructuring any principal payments, or is it strictly for rate?
It's purely for interest cost savings. It's rate to rate. Those bonds are structured in there to provide the level savings, and we're refunding more bonds in those years. That's why it's doing that.
Okay. And if you go a few slides later, slide 6.
Yes, sir.
So if we're looking at this, the left side's the refunding portion. So if we look at total cost to refinance this, it's what, that 792 number?
No, the 792 is actually the issuer contribution. That's money the city is going to prepay for interest that's due at the end of this year.
Okay.
It's money you already have budgeted. The total cost of issuance is $312,000.
Okay, so we're incurring expense of 312 to save 2.7,
Save 3.4.
3.4, but that's into the future. So that's future dollars. So in today's dollars, we're spending 312 of today's dollars to save roughly 2.7 of today's.
Well, actually, you'd be financing the cost of issuance anyway because it'd be part of bond proceeds, so it's actually future to future. I would compare that to the.
Yeah, all right. Okay, and later on the agenda, we're going to be asked to consent to some other bonds. So when I look at this fee here, like there's financial advisor, that's $24K.
Right.
On this slide, and then bond counsel is what, $26K?
Yes.
How does that compare, the workload from issuing these GO bonds as compared to a district, like a management district bonds? Similar work?
I would say this, I mean, yeah, I don't want to speak for, you're talking about like a MUD or management district. I would say it's probably similar work. I mean, you still have to go through all the offering document, rating calls, diligence calls. I mean, I'd say it's probably pretty similar. I'm not sure. I mean, each management district's a little different, so I can't speak to in generalities, but I can say yes, it all involves getting the deal ready, pricing it, taking the attorney general, and closing.
Okay, so here we're issuing on the new money portion, $21 million, and between bond counsel and financial advisor, it's what, 32?
32, 33, yes, sir.
Okay, so when we're looking later at consenting to issuing $3.8 million, and legal and financial advisor is $188,000.
You've got a pretty good deal then.
I'm sorry?
This is a pretty good deal.
It's one way to look at it. Okay, but the workloads is similar.
I mean, again, I don't know the stage of the management district. I mean, if it's brand new, there's a lot of stuff that's has to go into it. I mean, again, if I knew more about it, I could answer more definitively, but right now I'm hesitant to do so because I don't know which management district you're talking about.
Okay, all right. And I've got a couple other questions back for Mr. Upton on his slides, but I'll defer since you're still up there, and if anybody else wants to grill you.
It concludes your, Councilmember Reed, you had any questions?
Go ahead, Tony. You got it.
All right, Mr. Upton, if you can go back to slide 3.
Go forward.
Okay.
There's a column in there that shows 2007 bond.
Yes.
I don't know if we can pull that up on the screen. Yeah, so these are general obligations. So these have been voted on, and that 2007 column was a 2007 bond issue. So is it safe to assume that all these other projects were from a prior bond referendum? So like for the southeast quadrant of the Old Town site, that wasn't a 07 bond project.
Oh, those would be funded, not necessarily as a bond, they're funded as a CIP project. So it would be a fall in line where we just budgeted as a project to do. It wasn't like I'm sorry.
Mr.
Trent, yes, I think. Go on, Trent. Go ahead.
I believe that those were 2007 authorized bond funds for drainage projects. However, there were significant underruns on, say, the Cowards Creek diversion project, and then there's at least one other drainage project that was included in that we haven't moved forward with, the D.L. Smith project, and that some of those previously authorized drainage bond funds were reallocated to these other drainage projects as those projects became a priority.
Okay, and similar, so down in the street bonds where we're spending some on, or issuing debt on Max, McCard, and Smith Ranch, that's because we've seen savings on other road projects?
Yes, sir. So Bailey Road and Pearland Parkway were included in the 2007 bond program. And they were funded at 100% in the bond program. We later got 80% state or federal funding for those projects, so that freed up a significant amount of bonding capacity for road bonds. And when Max Road, McCard, as well as Smith Ranch Road, then later subsequently qualified for the 80-20 match, we were able to allocate those previous cost savings on road bonds to these projects for our 20% match on these. So they weren't specifically named in the 2007 bond program, but the bonds were general road bonds. They weren't necessarily tied to specific road projects.
Okay. All right, and then if you go one more slide to slide 4, we've got the column for city facilities / infrastructure, and everything on there meets that category. And these are for certificates of obligation. I guess the question is, does it, do we have to check that box to issue these as COs, or what's the reason for putting that on there, if there is one?
I'm going to have to defer that to Mr. Epperson because I'm not familiar with that one on that one. Be on that fourth row.
Mr. Epperson may not have an answer to that question. I believe when we looked at this last time, when we put together the intent to reimburse, we added that to make a distinction between these projects and some of the other ones. I can't remember if there were other ones on the list at that time or why we had that on this particular slide, but I believe that's a holdover from when we did the intent to reimburse slides. Anyone else have any recollection of this?
All of them are on there.
Yeah.
I mean, the reason I asked is, does that have anything to do with why we're issuing COs? I mean, to my knowledge, it doesn't, but when it was up there, it just caught my eye.
Yeah, I can't, as I said, that was a holdover from when we did that presentation. Okay. I can't remember why we added that column into that presentation when we did the intent to reimburse.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Okay. Any other question or comment from council? I know it's kind of confusing to the government class there, but when you have a government, you have to have a plan and a projected objective that you have to do to make the government run smoothly. And sometimes you have to borrow money to make that happen, and this is a process of part of what we're dealing with here today is types of borrowing that you can have and maintain as a city government to meet the goals of your governing of your city. So, any other question or comment from council on this item? Okay, we do have staff has Clay, does that complete your staff?
No, sir. Just to summarize, these are all.
The other two, I realize.
What's that?
It will be. His presentation covers the next two as well.
Yeah, and again, these are all planned and good financing for a lot of very needed improvements across the city and across a range of uses. We're taking advantage, I think, of remains a historically low rate environment, and the refinancing is exciting for the water and sewer side. We looked at this last year, you may recall, and the cost for the certificates for that guarantee were just too prohibitive, but now another year has passed and we're able to really get after some of that refinancing, and I think that'll help us get us a little bit more flexibility down the road for ratepayers and for us.
Okay. Let's realize that new business item 1 is primarily for the Texas Water's or the water and sewer system revenue and refunding bonds regarding that area, which is what new business item 1. Any further question or comment from council? Okay, we do have a motion second on the floor. Mr. Secretary.
Councilmember Reed.
Aye.
Councilmember Moore.
Aye.
Councilmember Little.
Aye.
Councilmember Perez.
Aye.
Councilmember Carbone. Aye. Ordinance 1537 passed on its first reading, 5-0.
Okay. That tucked away neatly. Let's move to item number 2. I have Councilmember Moore present this for our consideration.
Thank you, Mayor. Consideration possible action, first reading of ordinance number 1538. So moved.
We have a motion and a second. Any additional comments at this point?
No, sir. If there's any questions specific to this issue, but we've introduced these, so.
Okay. And this is for permanent improvement and refunding bonds, a portion of what the discussions have. Any question or comment from that further, Mr. Councilman? If not, we do have a motion second on the floor, Mr. Secretary.
Councilmember Moore?
Aye.
Councilmember Little?
Aye.
Councilmember Perez?
Aye.
Councilmember Carbone?
Aye.
Councilmember Reed?
Aye.
Ordinance 1538 passed on its first reading 5-0 with Councilmember Ordino absent from the chambers.
Okay, moving to new business item 3, which is the third part of the discussion that we've just had. Councilmember Little, would you present this for our consideration?
Consideration of possible action resolution number R 2017-1.
Second.
Second.
We do have a motion and a second on the floor. Any further comment on
No,
this
sir.
particular one? This one is for certificate of obligations, which was the part of the discussion we just had. Any other question on the Councilmember Carbone?
Yep, thank you, Mayor. Just to clarify, this is the CO, this is the debt that the voters haven't approved. The City Hall remodel is in there. I know we're already getting started, but I believe this project should have gone out to the voters in the next bond package. So that's the reason I'm going to vote no tonight.
Okay. Any other comment from council on this item? Hearing none, we have a motion and a second on the floor, Mr. Secretary.
Councilmember Little?
Aye.
Councilmember Perez?
Aye.
Councilmember Carbone?
No.
Councilmember Reed?
No.
Councilmember Moore?
Aye.
Resolution 2017-122 was approved 3-2 with Councilmember Ordino absent from the chambers.
Okay. Let's move to new business item number 4. And I'll ask Councilmember Perez if he'll present this for our consideration.
Thank you, Mayor. Consideration and possible action, first reading of ordinance number 2000T-25. So moved.
Second.
Okay. We do have a motion second on the floor. We are now in discussion. And we did have, if I can find it here, a communication from the Planning and Zoning Commission who did consider this particular request. And after considerable discussion, they did approve this by a vote of 5-0, and I enter this into the proceedings tonight. And as we move to, before we proceed with staff discussion, I do have a citizen who'd like to speak. Ed Mears. Huh? Ed, is this the one you wanted to speak on? It says 4 here. Which one? Okay. Well, it shows that you wanted to speak at item number 4, but we'll pass it up. Okay, good. Let me open this up for staff discussion.
Thanks, sir. In the course of the city, as we grow and things change, we do look at the zoning ordinance and updates to that to accommodate changing uses and so forth. This particular item incorporates a variety of text amendments recommend for your approval. We've worked with staff and various business owners. These incorporate some comments from council members, and our planner, Jamontane McBride, will introduce these as well.
Okay, that information on the record. Does the council have any question or comment? We hear this nice presentation.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor, members of the council, this is a request for approval of change in, this is a request for 3 amendments to the UDC. The first is to permit by right studios or learning centers for fine arts or performance arts in the OP or Office Professional District. The second is to permit by a CUP for food trucks at microbreweries, microdistilleries, and microwineries. The third is to prohibit metal bars and LED lighting around windows and exterior of buildings. We had a joint public hearing was held on May 15th to discuss this topic, during which time staff recommended approval of the proposed amendment. And as the mayor mentioned before, during the regular Planning and Zoning Commission meeting on May 15th, Commission recommended approval of by a vote of 5-0. That concludes staff's report.
Okay. That completes your report?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Does council have any question or comment on this item? Why is the, under non-residential zoning districts, OP has got a capital P in red? Is that meant to be a significant message to us in some way?
Mr. Mayor, that was just showing you that it was permitting it in the OP's district. So the red shows what we're changing for the text.
Okay.
In the UDC.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for that. Okay, let me turn it over to council here. Any question or comment from council on this item? I don't hear any question or comment. We do have motion second on the floor, Mr. Secretary.
Councilmember Perez?
Aye.
Councilmember Carbone?
Aye.
Councilmember Reed?
Aye.
Councilmember Moore?
Aye.
Councilmember Little?
Aye.
Ordinance 2000T-25 was approved 5-0 with Councilmember Ordino absent from the chambers.
And this one. With that information on the record, let's move to item number 5 on our collective agendas. I'll ask Councilmember Carbone if you'll present this for our consideration.
Thank you, Mayor. Consideration and possible action, first reading of ordinance number 2000M-159. So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. We're in discussion. We do have a receipt from the Planning and Zoning Commission. At their latest meeting back in May 16th, they did consider this particular request in detail. And after considerable discussion, they did list this as neighborhood services, passed by a vote of 5-0, and I enter this into the proceedings tonight for a discussion process. And ask staff to give us a staff review.
Sure. And Jay will present this one as well. There's several options that council needs to be aware of, and some of them involve different voting configurations. So,
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, this is a request for approval of a zone change from single-family residential 1 to general business on approximately 9.6 acres of land located at 3205 Dixie Farm Road. The site currently has a single-family residence on the property and is currently used as a single-family home. In the last year, there's been 2 workshops conducted regarding the development of this site for senior housing. This time the applicant is not proposing a use, but believes the uses in the GB zoning district in the UDC are suitable. A joint public hearing was conducted on May 15, 2017, at which time staff did not recommend approval of the change in zoning from R1 to GB for the following reasons. 1, the site is currently developed as a single-family home that is only appropriate for residential use. 2, the applicant has no specific use for development of the site. And 3, the buffer requirements by the UDC are not adequate at the scale to mitigate potential issues with height, noise, or other nuisance for the adjacent properties. During the regular Planning and Zoning Commission meeting on May 15th, the Commission considered the request and after discussion, as the mayor mentioned previously, recommended an approval by a vote of 5-0 of a change in zoning to neighborhood services. Staff does not recommend approval of the change in zoning from R1 to either neighborhood services or general business for the reasons previously mentioned. Additionally, staff received 7 public comment forms in opposition from the property owners within the 200-foot buffer, which is greater than the 20% threshold. Therefore, any action of approval will require approval by supermajority. Additionally, staff also received 44 letters of opposition from property owners outside of the 200 buffer. At this time, the City Council has 4 options. 1, the council by supermajority may pass the rezoning with a GB zoning assignment. 2, the council by supermajority may pass the rezoning with a neighborhood zoning assignment. 3, and although the staff report says simple majority, it's actually supermajority because of the 20% threshold for number 3. So the council by supermajority may pass the rezoning with a lower zoning classification, such as OP zoning assignment, or 4, the council by simple majority may deny the rezoning. Thank you.
That complete your staff report at this point?
Yes, sir.
Okay. I have some citizens who would like to speak on this item. And in the order in which I received them, Mr. Kevin Cole is first, and thank you for being here tonight.
Thank you, Mayor, City Council. Kevin Cole, residence address 3808 Houston Lake Drive here in Pearland, Texas. Business address 2800 East Broadway. Applicant for this particular zone change. At the Planning and Zoning Commission meeting after the public hearing that night, there was discussion by the commission on different zoning classifications other than GB. And I, along with the owners that night, told the commission that we were perfectly happy with the neighborhood services. It actually gives some additional protection to the neighbors next door. I do disagree with staff's comments about buffering. We have plenty of places in town where businesses are up against residential, and the Unified Development Code speaks to adjacency rules. This particular piece of property has been on the comprehensive plan and the future land use plan to move from residential to some sort of business services, restaurant type activity since at least 2004. May have been sooner than that, but at least since 2004. So we're here tonight to request the neighborhood services. It gives the owner now an opportunity to at least have some not say, but a plan of action to move forward on the piece of property. The public hearings and workshops that you guys had back in the fall for the senior housing project that came in, that contract, they actually terminated their contract, went back to Dallas, and we haven't heard from them since. So I know there's also been comments about a single-family residence sitting on there. That is true. That house is probably 60 years old. I will tell you the value is actually in the dirt. The value is not in that house that's sitting there. It's not the intent of the owner to keep that house. However, it's kind of difficult to go and just tear down a house without zoning to make something else happen. So, for example, if you were to completely deny it, then single-family residents will remain there, and you'll just have a house with 9.6 acres sitting there. So, again, we agree with the neighborhood services. We agreed with it with the planning and zoning the night of the public hearing in their meeting, and received a unanimous recommendation from them for that. I'm here for any other questions you may have. I think your next speaker to speak is also the owner of the property. Mayor, thank you.
I appreciate that. And we have another request from Tony. And thank you for being here tonight, too, as well. Thank you.
Good evening. My name's Tony Giuliani. I'm the owner of the property. This is my wife, Kim. And I guess, first of all, I've learned a lot from this process, and I want to thank everyone. I guess the first thing that we brought to you, I now understand that was not a good idea. It made probably no sense. There was too much development. It probably wasn't a good fit. So we felt like neighborhood services was a compromise. We feel, I guess I'm up here to say that, you know, I'm not, sometimes I don't get the right answer the first time, but I understand that people, the neighbors are sensitive. I'm particularly sensitive to the Lopez's. I know them personally. I think they're a great family. I said that last time. So if anything, you know, I want to concentrate on something that's suitable for them. And, you know, we reached out to them last time. If we do get neighborhood services, I plan on talking to them. We're going to at least follow the unified code, if not succeed it, to make them happy. I've talked to Walmart and talked to Home Depot. They don't really care. And as long as I don't put an Amazon there, I think Walmart's okay with it. So the neighbors in the back.
Okay.
Yeah. The neighbors in the back, just so you know, there's a pipeline about 650 feet in the back, and then we got an additional 200 feet behind that. So it's going to be 300. If there is a development there, there's going to probably be a detention in the back. So any kind of development is going to be at least 300 feet from those people. Home Depot is actually, for some of the neighbors, going to be closer to the back of that building because there's another pipeline behind my property and before their property in the back of Pine Hollow. So, but I guess the point I'm standing up here to tell you is I'm not a person that's, I want to be a good neighbor. I'm cognizant of, you know, what people have said. I understand the first idea wasn't a good one. So we're up here. We thought the second idea was a better one. We think it's a compromise, and we think it, if it's successful, we're going to continue to try to be a good neighbor and work with the people around us. Thank you for your time.
I appreciate those comments. That information record. Let's move to the council questions you might have, or questions or comments.
Yes, Mayor. I got a couple of concerns. The future land use plan shows this as retail, office, and services. I mean, that's what we've planned it to be. We've already put in a document together showing what this land was intended to be. I'm of the opinion that if the landowner comes and elects to change it to a zone that's in conformance with our future land use plan, with our comprehensive plan, these should be a slam dunk. There should be little to no controversy of this. We've already identified this is what we want it to be. You know, and when I'm a little concerned when I hear objections to the zone change, which we cannot tie to site plans being site plan related. You know, I'm not gonna lie, it's gonna be a tough piece of land to develop, but we have the UDC. That's what the intent of the UDC is to help us, guide us in how we develop tracts of land as they are zoned. And we keep stumbling upon ourselves, in my opinion, trying to find a way not to work with the UDC, but work around it by trying to put stipulations on pieces of land that I think that are just inappropriate. You know, I was perfectly happy with the GC. If they want neighborhood services, it's a lighter, less intense use. I think it's fine. But that piece of land, we've already intended for it to be commercial. I absolutely 100% understand why the neighbors don't want it. And, you know, I wouldn't say that doesn't factor, but it's not their land. It's not their land, and we've already identified that we want it to be commercial. So I'm just beside myself a little bit on why we're putting the landowner through this process, as difficult as it has been, when it should be, in my opinion, an absolute slam dunk that this gets approved. So I'm absolutely going to be a yes if the neighborhood service is what y'all want, and I'm hoping that we don't go through this kind of difficulty on any future tracts of land that are being requested to be zone changed into what we've already identified in our comprehensive plan as an appropriate use.
Okay. Any other question or comment at this point? Tony?
Thank you, Mayor. I agree with a little bit of what Councilman Perez says. At the end of the day, I think the P&Z got to a good compromise. Sounds like the landowner's okay with it. We still have some work to do from the city side, yeah, but I think right now, I'm fine with the NS zone change.
Okay. Any other question or comment? Councilman Reed, did you have a question? Any question or comment? We do have a motion second on the floor, Mr. Secretary.
Councilmember Carbone?
Aye.
Councilmember Reed?
Aye.
Councilmember Moore?
Aye.
Councilmember Little?
Aye.
Councilmember Perez?
Aye.
Ordinance number 2000M-159 was approved 5-0 on its first reading.
Okay. We're going to have a little change of pace here as we pick up something that has kind of a mislabeling of items. Ed Mears, why don't you come on up and do your comment, and we figured out what you were trying to say.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Ed Mears, resident, 2827 Moss Lake Lane, Pearland, Texas. And I apologize for the confusion on the form. Not your fault, Mr. Mayor. I'm speaking on a different issue. It's the Blue Ridge landfill. I want to thank you and the council for your continued support of us in this endeavor to bring a non-compliant landfill into compliance the best we can. Also, Mayor, congratulations on your reelection, and Councilmember-elect Owens. I want to thank the City Manager's Office, especially Mr. Branson, Mr. Epperson, and Mr. Wilson for you guys' continued support, too, with the Odor Task Force as we work towards finding solutions with Blue Ridge Landfill through TCQ and our City 2009 settlement agreement. Thanks, you guys, also for the resolution you passed to suspend the permit until Blue Ridge becomes in compliance. We'll see how that sticks with TCQ. And also especially thank you, Councilmember Reed and Councilmember Perez, for your specific letters in response to the PAO that was made available through TCQ. We support that. We appreciate that support. As you know, Republic Services continues to be a bad neighbor in our neighborhood with the operation and maintenance of Blue Ridge Landfill both on and off site, with continued violations of both TCQ state and federal law, as well as our 2009 settlement agreement. We are in the period right now, we're waiting for the public or the proposed agreed order and the hearing, and hopefully in July. And I understand the City Manager's Office will be present to help testify, and we appreciate that. I do ask that the city does take actions now with economic sanctions to explore suspending the contracts to deliver the sludge from the Reflection Bay Wastewater Treatment Plant. No reason to patronize a business at which we have petitioned to suspend a permit, as well as negotiate with Waste Management to stop delivering any waste to Blue Ridge Landfill. The revenue source is the receipt of waste. And we also need to enforce all other areas of our 2009 settlement agreement. Last week, I submitted to you evidence that the Blue Ridge Landfill continues to violate the 2009 settlement agreement, specifically the use of their trucks on our prohibited routes. That was a promise they made to us in 2009 and began in 2010. And over 6 weeks, just some random sampling of trucks, every single one of their contracted trucks hauling leachate to Pasadena passed through on FM 2234 Shadow Creek Parkway. Roughly, that's about 6 trucks a day, if you interpolate that in there, or extrapolate it rather, and that's probably about 200 trucks. I would see if there's any other evidence through our data collection systems to collaborate that. Blue Ridge also failed to submit in the most recent surface emission monitoring report. That's 8 years now of noncompliance. I think it's pretty upsetting as a city that they continue to break those promises in the settlement agreement. First duty of our government is to protect our citizens, and we're not being protected. We're suspicious of the groundwater out there too. So the city has legal jurisdiction over the engineering, management, and administration of the landfill. Do like our mud, hire an attorney, suspend the contracts, stop the money flow, and seek legal action now because they're in violation of both the surface emission monitoring and the trucks on our roads. Thank you.
Good. I appreciate those comments, and thank you.
Thanks, y'all.
We appreciate that. Thanks so much. Moving to new business item number 6, Councilmember Reed, would you do the honor?
Thank you, Mayor. Consideration and possible action, first reading of ordinance number CUP 17-00006. So moved.
Second.
Okay. Have a Motion and second, we're in discussion. We did receive also a communication from the Planning and Zoning Commission as a result of the May 16th, 2017 meeting. After a considerable discussion, they did go through a process of looking at the issues, and the final decision was that the motion was made, and it did pass by a vote of 5-0. And I enter that into the proceedings tonight as we go through the discussions. And since we're in discussion, as staff report.
Thank you, sir. This is a request for a conditional use permit with the voter-approved initiative that packaged liquor stores are now permitted in the city. One of the provisos that the council elected was to make those conditional uses. So we have had a slew of these as they've been able to find their marketing. And this particular location is in the Shadow Creek Parkway area in an existing strip center. And so like the P&Z, we have a positive recommendation for your consideration.
Okay, good. And this location is just several doors over from Five Below. I don't know whether that's a good name for their new liquor store or not, but maybe a sink down lower. But council, have any question or comment at this point? I don't hear anything from council on this. Mr. Secretary, we do have motion second on the floor.
Councilmember Reed?
Aye.
Councilmember Moore?
Aye.
Councilmember Little?
Aye.
Councilmember Perez?
Aye.
Councilmember Carbone?
Aye.
Ordinance number CUP 17, 4 zeros and a 6 was approved on its first reading, 5-0.
Okay. Moving to debate item number 7. Councilmember Moore, would you do the honor?
Thank you, Mayor. Consideration possible action, first reading of ordinance number 1529-2, so moved.
We have a motion second on the floor. We have staff report.
Thanks, sir. This that time of the year, we've completed the CAFR audit for the last fiscal year. Also, council may recall about a month ago, we brought to you a list of potential items for additional supplementals in the general fund. And so this item would accomplish both of those, but there is some discussion, and Mr. McCarter has a presentation just to frame it for us.
Absolutely. Well, good evening, Mayor and Council.
Good to see you.
As Mr. Pearson stated, my name is John McCarter. I serve as Budget Officer here with the City of Pearland. We're here to talk today about FY17 projections and the mid-year allocation potential for use of the excess fund balance. So first, it's probably best to talk about why we do the FY17 budget projection, why we do budget projections at all. City Council adopts the annual budget ordinance, usually in September of every year. We do carryovers as our first budget amendment. Those are things that were not completed in the fiscal year prior that we move over to this fiscal year. And about midway through the fiscal year, once we start with our annual budget process, we start to look at projections in terms of where we're going to finish out the year to give us a baseline for the coming year and more accurately, reflect the city's position since the first time we went around with the budget, which would have been about 8 months ago now. It also provides us an opportunity to allocate additional fund balance, readjust ourselves in accordance with things within and outside of our control that have happened over the last year. And again, this year, projections will also include over policy, general fund dollars. Typically, and this is kind of a caveat, typically we do these as two separate items. I believe last year we used it for streets and sidewalks. We did that much earlier on in the year. We held off on that until this point this year due to the large fund balance that was carried over with the audit, and because we didn't want to have four readings back to back. So a little bit more about the process for this fiscal year, for this projection. We started this process April 3rd with the budget kickoff. We do that every year internally to kind of outline the rules of the game for our department heads and their managers before they submit their year-end projections. They really get the month of April to work on those, to put those together, and to submit those to us. After we receive those in the budget office, we lock the departments out of the system. and scrutinize those in meetings with them. We walk through the projections for FY17 and then what their ideas are for FY18, where they're going, and how we can help them get there. And then the remainder of that period in May is really just for us to scrutinize, for us to follow back up. You can imagine there's a lot of stuff moving, and that's really for us as a budget office to make sure that we get you guys something quality here. May 31st, that's the deadline for us to include it in the city council meeting packet. So we submit that for your consideration tonight. Tonight would be the first reading, and the second reading would be 2 weeks from now on June 26th. So we'll start with kind of the broad strokes summary, start kind of big picture, and then we'll get into the nuances and come right back to this big picture. What we have outlined here in the far left column is kind of what we call our starting point for projections. Now that means it's the adopted budget, but in addition to that, the funded carryovers that council approved, I believe it was December of 2016. In the middle column, we have our FY17 projections without mid-year allocations included. I would call this our operational projections. Again, we're kind of talking about two things that are very related, but they are two separate things. And then the far right column is the FY17 total projection. So we've taken basically all the mid-year allocation items and dropped them into our projection, and this is what you get as the total amount. I do need to add the caveat that as the ordinance is written tonight, all the items are included. So if we want to drop those and move those in any way, it would take an amendment to the existing ordinance to do so. And I'll defer to Darren on the specifics of how to make that happen. So moving into general fund revenue, kind of an overview of where we stand with that. My plan is to just kind of walk down and hit some of the variance points with this, and then if you guys have any questions after the presentation, be happy to answer those. Sales tax we've left flat. We are trending, if you look at it as a straight line basis, a little behind our 12-month, but we look at these, we extrapolate these out differently each month. So we have an internal model of how we expect to see these expenditures come in. Through the end of April, they have been trending pretty well within about a percentage point of where we'd like to see those. I will say we got some June numbers in that are a little bit lower. We should have a sales tax report out this Thursday to give you a little bit more indication on where that stands, but we're comfortable leaving the sales tax number where it is currently. The property tax number is down 3%. We adjust this at mid-year based on the updated rolls that we get from the assessor's office. So every month the assessor comes in and they look at the cases that have been taken before them, wins, losses, and they change the number for us. I will add that we have seen this vary month to month, so this could go up, this could go down by the end of the fiscal year. At projections, we use the information that we have handy, so we took it down to match their number at a 98.5% collection rate. So that's the number you see there. The next largest one, I'm going to jump down to licenses and permits. We saw that trending ahead pretty early on in the fiscal year, and that has not slowed down ever since. I would not point to any one specific thing. We see pretty much all around in those different revenue accounts that they are, trending ahead of budget. The next line is the transfers in. Transfers in are kind of predetermined costs. The difference here, and we'll hit on this a little bit towards the end of the presentation, is that we have included a transfer of fund balance from the health claims fund into the general fund, and that accounts for the difference that's here. Again, we'll hit on the specifics of that a little more later on. Investment earnings are a little tricky because there's two accounts that are rolled up into investment earnings. One is the true investment earnings cost, and the other is an offsetting journal that's done. Any more information, I'll have to ask my accounting folks to back me up on that. But basically, at the end of the fiscal year, that negative balance is offset, and you realize your actual investment earnings. So you see the negative now. At the end of the fiscal year, that will be a positive. We're projecting that to be at $180,000. So looking next at, expenses. So when we look internally at projections, we're really looking at things in two different ways. One is non-salary expenses, and the other is salary expenses. Because we have departments that operate in different ways and are set up differently, the salaries really can mess with your projections a lot. So when we look at the baseline for each one of our departments, we look at non-salary expenses to give us kind of our true north in terms of how they're managing their budgets. You saw some big-ticket overtime items that are a result of vacancies. We see some salary savings, and in the next slide, we'll include the vacancies so you can see the full number there. But long story short, this is kind of the way the FY17 projection without mid-year, kind of dead in the center of that slide, is where we're projecting, and then the amended budget to the left is that amount that includes our rollovers. So just to, again, walk down and talk about some of the variances here. The first one is the city council variance. That's for our new council member. That's iPads, some training costs, and other associated costs with bringing a new council member on board. The second one going down is for the city secretary. That large increase was due to the fact we had budgeted for the runoff election this year. However, we used that funding to do the special election, and I believe it was November. So that got used up. We needed to obviously have the runoff this year. The next one down is communications. We had some contractual costs associated with recording city council meetings. We were able to offset most of this, but with a small budget like that, it's tough to get all the way down. The next is engineering and capital projects. This is at the bottom. I'm sorry, this is out of order here, but it says Public Works, Capital Projects, Engineering. Sorry about that. These are costs associated with a temporary move to Hill House with the construction of City Hall. So these can't be capitalized because they're not capital expenses. So we need to absorb those into an operational cost because we don't want to pay for them over 30 years. So we had to bring that in for the move upcoming. I believe it's next month. The finance variance is due to a number of kind of small items. One is the appraisal services. That's payments we pay out to the county. Some training costs and equipment rental, specifically with our postage machine, and public notices and advertising that for whatever reason have just been running ahead this year. The library saw an increase there, and that's not due to any contractual changes. We just didn't have the whole amount included in the initial budget for that contract, so to true that up, we needed to catch it up at projections. So again, no changes there in what we're supposed to be paying. It's just we need to reflect that full amount. We didn't have that in the initial budget. The other requirements, this is kind of our catch-all. A lot of things that are budgeted out of here don't specifically impact one department, or they impact every single department. We have an offset within other requirements that's reflected here in non-salary for grant revenue. Long story short, we budget a negative amount, so when we need to allocate to one place, we raise up the negative amount and then lower the other one, and it kind of offsets it to keep our bottom line the same, because as staff, we can't allocate over the given amount for a fiscal year budget. So we have that offset there to take care of any variances throughout the year. The other is radio and radar contract costs. We contract with the city of Houston to maintain our radios citywide. And those costs went up this year. And those went up after we had taken care of the budget, so we assumed that. And then again, kind of getting back in compliance with our capital leases, just reflecting the true amount on the contracts. We went and did an inventory, and there was about $120,000 in costs that weren't reflected originally. It's updated, so we have what we need now to get through the end of the fiscal year. So moving in, now we look at all accounts within the general fund. Now this is everything. The number all the way to the right is going to tie out to your Exhibit A. I'm kind of walking from left to right. The FY17 actual amount, and I have an asterisk here towards the bottom, that reflects through April 2017. I know that seems like it's kind of far away. We don't typically make decisions based on numbers until the month closes. Because at the end of every month, finance comes through and updates and blesses the numbers, and until we get to that point, we generally don't like to share those out. I think May is closing this week, or maybe beginning of next, so we should have numbers by the next time we come and talk about this for another month, but just keep in mind that those actual amounts are through the end of May. Really, the differences you're going to see here are those departments that had a lot of salary savings. Their percentages are going to change a lot. Specifically, you see the fire department goes from a negative amount to a positive amount. That's due to the large increase in overtime that we saw this year, due partially to vacancies, and as we saw in the staffing study, partly to understaffing. The other one is police. We saw them at a 0% increase on the kind of nuts and bolts side, but with the salaries in there, again, in large part due to vacancies, the overtime brought that number up. In other requirements, we see that take another jump up, and that is because for really two reasons. One is for the cost of living adjustment that we did initially This fiscal year was a little bit under budget, so we needed to realize that to get to the total cost of what that actually was by the time we adopted the budget. The second reason is similar to the grants. We budget a negative amount for salary savings. So we have the negative amount in there that basically offsets the salary savings as you go throughout the year. Because by the end of the first payroll, you're generally under budget because you generally have vacancies. So that's included in that number there. The next thing I'll hit on are the potential mid-year allocations. We walked through this list, I believe, last, or maybe it was a month ago or so, with some discussion. Obviously, some things have changed, and we right now have the ordinance written as if it includes all of these items. If council would like to opt to increase the over policy dollar amount, the ones in blue highlighted are those that would not necessarily directly impact our operations. There are a few on here, I would say number 8, natatorium expenses, and 15 as HVAC, that were emergency repairs that were already undertaken. So that's more of a reimbursement than it is an additional. But staff has identified these items for discussion if council is interested in bringing that over policy dollar amount up. Elimination of all of these from this list would bring us to about $1.4 million over fund balance minimums, which would put us in a good place going into FY18. It's always a good idea to have that over policy amount. So I'll bring it back to kind of the overview. Again, I want to revisit that the middle column is what we'll call operational. The right side is our total projection. That includes all of our mid-year allocation numbers. Moving right along into water and sewer. This again here is an overview. It's a little different because it's a enterprise fund, not quite set up the same way, but you can see a general overview here of our revenues and expenses. We are going to be net increasing that the difference between the two. And I'll start that explanation with our revenue. We are projecting an increase of 2.7% in revenue. That's really led by the charges and services. The water sales were trending ahead of where we anticipated them to be at this point. Even with some of the considerations with the ERP, we're seeing some delayed billing with that, but we're not seeing less billing. So the amount on the bills don't change. We're just, receiving those later. You'll see that reflected in the next variance report that comes out because that number will go down. Again, just understand that those are billed out, so those will end up coming back to us. We did adjust down slightly for the late fees because we have waived some of those with the transition to the new system. Investment earnings, again, we hit on. That's not reflective of the true cost there, or the true actual year to date. The miscellaneous went down as much as it did because we had recycling revenue in there, and we don't have that anymore. So we basically removed that, and that accounted for the difference there in that amount. Looking at the expenditure side of the house, we do show reductions in both the finance, utility billing services, and public works. We showed a slight increase in IT, and that was driven by repair, that's repair to equipment, and maintenance, that's annual maintenance paid on software. Kind of the catch-22 in that game is you don't necessarily know what that's going to be ahead of time, and you're kind of at the will of the developers on that. Looking at other requirements, the administration here is pretty much the same as we talked about in general fund. We had a little bit of a hit for the cost of living coming in over where we anticipated, and we also had a negative balance there budgeted for offset of the salary savings. The debt service was planned defeasance that we undertook, so that wasn't included in the initial budget, but we did plan to do it. So that's the variation there. And then the last kind of fund we wanted to hit on, we don't normally talk about health claims at this point in the fiscal year. However, at our meeting with our advisors in, must have been April, late April, we were looking at the numbers of how our plan costs were coming in compared with our contributions, and we were looking at adding about $1 million into fund balance. Now our goal, and it's reflected here at the bottom, this year is to get to about 30% of fund balance. That number, again, is reflected at the bottom here. For us to add the full amount that we would have put us like in the mid to high 40s, somewhere in there. So we had some ideas about how to avoid doing that. Obviously, we want to make the best use of that fund. funding. So being that the amount had been paid out by the general fund, we were able to do, or at least plan to do, an administrative transfer back into the general fund to make use of that money this fiscal year if council sees fit, to avoid that big bump in fund balance. When we look at the amount right now, we're at roughly 38%, so we'll look at making use of that next year as we look at plan design. But this amount here, on the transfers out, that 500,000 was added in at projections to avoid such a big jump in fund balance for this fiscal year. I will add one caveat that I did not put in my PowerPoint. Also included in this, again, not typical, is a new civil service plan for our police department. With the onset of our new police chief, Johnny Spires, there was a reorganization over there, the creation of the assistant police chief position, or an additional, and then they moved the lieutenant position up to a captain position. By state law, that needs to be adopted by city council, so the timing was good to attach it onto this budget amendment. So next steps, I'm happy to take, and department heads here are happy to take questions and comments from council on some of the operations side. Probably a related and yet separate discussion about the use of the over policy dollars. Again, just as a reminder, the way the ordinance is written, any changes to that would need to be as an amendment. And then we'll look to come back in 2 weeks with follow-ups. So at this point, I'm happy to take any questions.
Complete your report on?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Appreciate it. That's a pretty good report. There's a lot of data that you had to go through to sort that out. And I know a government class is probably a little confused on that. We are a government that has to have a budget too, like a family. And sometimes air conditioning goes out and you got to take care of it after your budget year that you have. And then there are times when you don't get a little special gift from grandfather, and that kind of goes into your budget. So we do run by budgets to do our job that we have to do. Clay, do you have to add something?
No, sir. I think Mr. Carter covered it very well, so stay by.
Let me open it up for council here. I'll start with Councilmember Carbone with.
Thank you, Mayor. I guess if you go back to slide 6, the non-salary general fund expense. So on here you mentioned with city council, so we didn't budget for the additional 7th position?
No.
Okay. Even though we knew it was coming like 3 years ago? Okay. And on the library, you mentioned, we see this large increase. I guess, what was the underlying cause for that?
There was a portion of the contract, so I'm going off the top of my head, I'm sorry, I might have to follow up with a Thursday memo, but there was basically a portion of the contract we pay rent and operations costs, and as I understand it, a portion of the rent wasn't included, as it was on a page that wasn't seen. I'm not sure. The nuts and bolts as part of the contract was left out of it, and I don't know the nuances of how that happened.
Okay. All right, and I believe slide 11, is that the utility? I read the Thursday memo. I've heard from several taxpayers, or I guess users or customers of the water and sewer, and I've heard from several people they've been skipped. They skipped a month being billed, and then a couple of them have called in and they're not going to catch up. And I don't see in a macro scheme, when I've talked to just a few people that have actually paid attention, and they missed their bill, and the next bill was not, you'd expect it to be somewhere near double. I know there might have been some summer, winter adjustment, but in the big scheme of things, they just missed paying a month's worth of water and sewer expense. So on this side, we're going to, high level simplifying it, if they saved 1/12 of their expense, are we going to miss 1/12 of our revenue? And there's people in the audience nodding their heads, so I'm still not comfortable with that. And I know you'd mentioned waiving the fees, Again, that's going to be a decrease in revenue. We're not cutting anybody off right now for non-payment. So, I mean, I just see this kind of snowballing, and here we're projecting an increase in revenue. So I'm still not comfortable with what's going on. I don't know if anybody here wants to try to fill me in or explain it. But right now, looking at a 3% increase in charges for services, from everything I've seen in real life, I would expect that to be a 10% decrease.
If I may just briefly address that issue, it does relate to revenues received, but we do intend within this year to get everybody up to speed with their particular water bills. What happened was, in the calculation of the winter quarter average, we noticed that right when we were in the process of getting ready to send those bills out. So we did not send those bills out, and they were not billed for that particular time. It's my understanding that everything has been fixed with the winter quarter average, and then new bills have been sent out or in the process that will catch them up on their past bill, plus they'll get another bill approximately 30 days later, a little bit different than their normal billing date, that will catch them up on their current. So in essence, we're basically a month to a month and a half behind on our billing, but we will catch them up within 30-day increments prior to the end of the year. We also are going to have, on a related note to that, we're going to have on our web page, we're looking for this on the city's, we're in the process of trying to get that out this week, any and all information that will address that issue where people can go to and get the up-to-date information. If somebody actually has an account, they can log on to the system and they can see what the total bill is for what they've actually used, but we haven't invoiced them for that amount yet. We will be doing that, and it will be forthcoming, and we will catch up by the end of the year.
Can I add a quick thing? And also I had the same question. From the way we receive those payments, we receive those payments in the month that the service was rendered. So if we get it in, say, October, and it's a September, the money goes into September. So as long as we get the money before the year closes, which I believe is November-ish. Yeah, so as long as we receive that money before we close out the full fiscal year, it goes back for that, regardless of when the payment was taken.
So for the folks that completely miss paying a month, what I'm hearing is we're going to try to get it out of them before we close our fiscal year. That's correct. So the folks that are unfortunately, running their tight budget, living, paycheck to paycheck, they're going to have to come up with an extra month's water bill payment at some point.
Well, what we didn't want to do is the information based on the system was inaccurate. We found that out. It was a calculation calculation error. We found that out. Instead of billing them incorrectly, we stopped the bill completely and determined that what we would do is we would get that corrected and then send out the correct bills. We didn't want people overpaying or underpaying and then having to deal with that issue at a later time. We wanted to get them the correct amount.
All right. On the civil service, you kind of mentioned that as a footnote towards the end. Can you dive into a little bit more detail on what we're doing there and the changes we're making?
I might have to ask the chief to come speak to that.
First budget talk.
I was looking around for the chief when you said it. I think he's watching us on TV laughing somewhere from the Caribbean. Yeah. He said he was going to, but I think you're right. Basically, with the new structure, I was allowed to have another assistant chief, and through the Berkshire study, they recommended 2 assistant chiefs. What we found was we had a command structure with now 2 assistant chiefs, 3 captains, and a lieutenant who was actually part of our command. The lieutenant was over administrative services. He's gained a lot of responsibility over the years. So we wanted to move that to captain. He's over professional standards, which is our internal affairs, our SROs, juvenile unit, and our community services. So what we wanted to do is have 2 assistant chiefs with the responsibility of 2 captains underneath them.
Okay, so we're moving lieutenant up to the captain.
Yes, sir.
I
It's
guess
not a new position. It's just an advancement, just moving up there. He's gained a lot of responsibility, so we wanted to kind of give him a title to go along with it.
Okay. And then I guess the assistant chief is not part of civil service?
No, those are not. Actually, so one assistant chief will actually be over the patrol division and criminal investigations. The other assistant chief will be over the captain of support services, which is your animal services, your jail division, and your communications. And then that assistant chief will also be over the captain over what now will be the administrative services, which, like I said, is the new position that came from lieutenant, which is mainly the internal affairs was the biggest part of that position that we wanted to get a little bit more responsibility. That's a huge part of our department is maintaining our internal affairs.
And this was all in line with Berkshire study?
Yes, sir.
All right, thank you.
Okay. Any other question or comment from council?
Thank you, Mayor. I mean, I think with everybody who looks at our budget, there's, at least on the general fund, just to simplify it, I mean, it should cause us pause. We're about to go into the budget cycle, and we're going to have to really think about, are we going to make sacrifices, and what those sacrifices are going to be? Are we going to start looking at cutting services? Are we going to look at increasing revenue? And now's the time that we start these conversations. Right now, on the general fund, we're $8,800,000 off revenue versus expenditures. It's 11.7% differential.
Did we switch our screen to the chart we're talking about here?
Yes, that would be, I'm looking on mine, that was 496, so that would, general fund table. No, I'm sorry.
Thank you.
No, not that one. Yeah, that's the one. I mean, we're just struggling. We're struggling to make it. And, you know, I'm a little concerned when we continue to talk about losing the CEO as a tool and having to push that out to the voters, because that makes it more difficult for us to make our budget when we have things that come up. So, you know, we'll have a lot more opportunity to discuss this over the budget session, but we're really going to have some long conversations. This last year, we went above rollback just to make up some differences from years where we weren't raising up taxes, and we still didn't make up the difference. And this year, we may end up with further limitations from the state that prevents us from doing as much as we did. Our hands may be tied. You know, it's going to be a difficult budget session. So those of y'all that are in the audience who like to come to budget, I mean, just bear with us, because we've got a lot of decisions we've got to make. We've got a lot of programs that are underfunded: sidewalks, streets, utilities, and we're still just on one fund, $8.8 million over budget. So it's going to be a fun budget process. I'd like to thank staff. We got some hiccups in there. Obviously, it's a big fund. I expect hiccups. You know, there's some stuff that falls through the cracks. I don't hold you to perfection as long as you clean it up in the end. So thanks for all that you did. Appreciate it.
It will be a difficult budget cycle. I mean, we tried to get more money last year to help with some of the stuff, and here we are. I just feel like we're overspending. We're trying to do too many programs too quick, and I know we're kind of far behind, but we can't continue to keep hastening this with the budget that we have.
I'd like to add that's with the advantages that we're getting from the TIP funding that we're getting. We're getting projects funded at 80% by the state and the federal government to make up for loss of revenue from the 07 bond that wasn't approved. You know, we're getting additional money and we're still not making our budget. You know, we may end up having to have a conversation of, are we just not going to fund certain programs?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor.
Cody?
I mean, not to be an optimist, but what we're doing here is we're allocating $3 million for additional sidewalks, additional streets, take-home cars, 6 additional firefighters. I mean, that's part of this this agenda item is an additional allocation of $3 million. So, you know, I can worry about the future as well, but I mean, as of right now, what we're looking at is how are we allocating the $3 million? So if we've got concern, I mean, we've talked about all these items last time, staff's brought it to us again. So I'm not saying budget, well, I'm gonna enjoy the budget one way or the other, I always do, but as of right now, we're $3 million over general fund policy. Is this how we want to allocate that? That's the question before us tonight.
No, and I appreciate that. We have an attentive audience. I think that this is the beginning of the budget conversation. I think that's an important point to be made. I'm fine with how we're allocating it. We've talked at it for a while. Again, I thank staff for what they're doing. We've had a little bit of additional money, not enough to make up the difference. We're still at deficit spending, but I mean, we're allowing to to ease the burden a little bit.
Our biggest problem is we're growing too fast as a city with too many people. We gained something like about close to 7,000 this last year, and we look like we have slowed down a bit now. So what it does, it creates needs that we hadn't anticipated when we did the budget originally. So it's I don't know whether staff has given comments in regard to that policy or not.
Well, it's the Pearland way is that fast growth, and we're trying to catch up in a lot of ways. And you know, the point's been made. You know, the expenditures include rollovers, which are one time. We also consciously deployed some of the fund balance at the beginning of the year for predominantly one time. And as was mentioned just last, we do have over targeted fund balance that you know, trying to weigh getting that into use for the people and meeting some needs. And so that's the array of those 16 items. And you know, it brings us down tight, and it is what it is. I mean, we're all very conscious of that, and we work at it every day. So, you know, this budget will be an enjoyment for all of us, like it always is. I mean, but we're here now, and we're trying to get out ahead of it by deploying this money. And you know, we'd recommend these things first and foremost, and glad that there seems to be interest in getting after that. That frankly helps us, and you know, getting after it early and now, and knowing what the plan is, rather than trying to wait and on top of everything else after the fiscal year starts, trying to get after these things.
I don't think the growth is going to slow down. We're blessed by having quality growth, which is very positive. But when we did the budget, started about this time last year and finished it up during the summer. In September, we decided what the budget should be for the coming year. And since then, a lot of things have changed. We've had an awful lot more people coming in, and that's part of the overtime. You're going to have more police officers, more fire department people. And if you're running short of staff, you either hire some more people or you run overtime, and so it's really a challenge to try to match. If we were not such a quality city that everybody wanted to come live, and we wouldn't have this problem. But I'd rather have this problem because we're growing with quality and with quality people. So that's there is a little bit of stress in our budget corners a little bit, but I think it's something we have to make the right decision for. I would rather try to keep up instead of getting behind on projects and hiring and because we don't. I don't think our population is going to slow down any. I think that we're going to, like Houston and the rest of the cities in this area, Houston is growing at a tremendous rate, and we're getting our fair share of it. And the good news is we're getting quality share, so that's even better. But if we don't keep up, we're going to start getting further behind. And I think once you most of the meeting tonight has been about our financing and how we're addressing some of the issues. So I think we're not too far off budget, or it becomes a considerable crisis because I know we're a little low on police officers right now. We're going to have to bring some more of those in because of the growth. And the fire department, I think, Chief, you're looking at spreading out and opening some fire stations to meet our safety codes, and that's going to mean some additional strain on our budget that probably we had not anticipated originally because of the growth factor. So, isn't it nice to have quality growth? And we're sure not shrinking. And the good news is people keep coming because we have such a quality city. Everybody wants to come here. So I hate to slow that down. I know the realtors probably would not want that to happen at a slower pace than it is now. Any further comment from council at this point? Is that if we have an overage a little bit, Clay, is that going to mean we may have to dip into our reserve a little bit?
No, Mayor, this is strictly using some of the existing general fund balance that's in the bank, and recognizing some of the operations that we start out with, and then deploying that $3 million for those 16 items. So that's where we're at. So we're remain over the targeted fund balance, and we'll start fresh here in another 6 weeks.
Any other question or comment? Any council? Mr. Secretary, we do have motion second on the floor. See what we come up with here.
Councilmember Moore?
No.
Councilmember Little?
No.
Councilmember Perez?
Aye.
Councilmember Carbone?
Aye.
Councilmember Reed?
Aye.
First reading of ordinance 1529 passed 3-2 with Councilmember Ordino absent from the chambers.
Okay. With that information in the record, let's move down to item 8 on our agenda, new business. Councilmember Little, would you present this for our consideration?
Consideration of possible action resolution number R 2017-114.
A motion. Did I hear a second? Yes. We have a second. We're in discussion. Staff report.
Thanks, sir. The city did go out in the past for fuel purchases. We pay the spot market and then plus a premium on top of that. That includes transport to our fueling depots, and so we need the fuel for our regular operations. This covers the next 12 months.
We need an upgraded screen here. Got the screen right? Council have any question or comment at this point on this item? Anybody? Chairman, Mr. Secretary, we do have motion second on the floor.
Councilmember Little?
Aye.
Councilmember Perez?
Aye.
Councilmember Carbone?
Aye.
Councilmember Reed?
Aye.
Councilmember Moore?
Aye.
Resolution 2017-114 is approved 5-0 with Councilmember Ordino absent from the chambers.
Moving in our agenda, item number 9, new business. Councilmember Perez, would you present this for our consideration?
Thank you, Mayor. Consideration possible action resolution R 2017-116. So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. We're in discussion. Staff report.
Well, Mr. Buchanan has a few words on this project. This is over in the Lower Kirby District, provides for the funding of construction of South Spectrum.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. This is about 3 months ago, we entered into an agreement with the development agreement with the Ivy District Modern Green to develop South Spectrum from Kirby all the way over to 288. Their developer's doing a portion, and this is the portion that will be from Promenade over to Kirby. And this is the project that's being jointly funded by the district, the EDC through the city, and the developer Modern Green. So this is a $3.3 million bond issue, and it's required every time. This will be the district's third issuance of debt. And when they issue debt, it's required that they come to City Council and get your authorization to do that. Happy to answer any questions.
Council, any question or comment on this item?
Yep, thank you, Mayor. So this is bond issuance. When you look through the detail, they're issuing about $3.8 million in bonds, and the legal fees are $111,000, financial advisor $77,000, for a total of $188,000 on $3.8 million of debt. Earlier, we approved $21 million with legal fees in the tune of $32,000. Do you have any idea why? And it sounds like it's about the same amount of work if you've listened to agenda item number 1. So what, can you help close the gap on those two?
You know, I'm not an expert on the fees that are charged by, but I think you'd find, I know we've talked about, the board's talked about before, you know, the relative fees that they pay, and I think you'd find that this is the realm of fees that are paid by your municipal utility districts and your municipal management districts. Cities, obviously, especially a city of our size, gets much better fees. Now, they'll tell you that obviously when they go out and do a bond issue for a very small issuer like we are, that it is a considerably lot larger of work compared to when you're doing repetitive work for a city like ours that issues debt after debt after debt after debt, where obviously this district's only issued, it's only got $160 million in value. And so this will only be the third issuance. Now, over time, as it gets bigger, I think you should see its fees drop.
Right,
now, whether you believe that or not, that's, yeah.
Well,
yeah.
If you're saying it, then of course I believe it.
Well, I'm saying what they say.
Okay.
yeah, yeah.
I think he makes a good point. I think we need to take a good deep dive into how those fees are calculated, and get at least a Thursday memo out to give us a better understanding as why they're differential. You know, there's some analogies for legal services for public entities and private entities, and there's some differentiation. Engineering services for public and private entities, and there's some differentiation. But I rarely see it 3 and 4 or 5 times greater. And the scale, I agree with, it just looks weird.
Compared to a city to a district.
Comparing it, it just, it cannot be so much more work, and the fees are not going to be spread out that much more. I mean, they still got to be profitable businesses. So I doubt that our consultants are, you know, living hand to mouth with the fees that we're giving them. So, and to be honest with you, if we're paying that much, if the district is paying that much more, and we have some responsibility to that district, maybe we should be using the same consultant, and we can get the same fees. But I think it's worth at least giving us some explanation, particularly the landos over there, because they're the ones that got to pay for this. Give them some explanation as to why they're paying so much more.
Okay.
I think it's a good idea. You know, as long as we can get Kirby Drive and that whole area up there in the Lower Kirby District with quality development, that supports our tax base. And I realize that some of this, the road that we're talking about, part of it is in the management district, which he'll take care of. and part of it laps over into the non-management district, which is a little bit closer to Kirby. And we just put two over there, a brand-new company that just came in, and they need that roadway. So I think it's a good plan. I think we need to do these things because it'll pay off in the long run. And if we don't do it, we're not going to get people to come out on Kirby Drive and complete that area out there with quality development like we're getting. Council, have any question, comment on this?
One last one, Mayor. Assuming the bond is approved by council, what's the schedule of the project?
We are already hired the engineers, so I would say we probably wouldn't start construction maybe till the end of the first quarter of next year.
End of the first quarter next year?
Yeah.
That's for the entire length of the project from Kirby all over or are you doing it in phases?
I'd say probably a 9-month project. I mean, the good thing about the project is there's no, it's wide open. There's no businesses, there's no driveways, there's nothing to close, there's no street closures. Obviously, we're gonna have to reconfigure Kirby Drive a little bit.
But we're not doing it in phases, we're doing the entire roadway.
We're doing the entire, from Promenade. The developer's doing this section from Promenade to 288, that little section. They're already underway on that.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Good. Is there any question or comment at this point from anybody? We do have a motion second on the floor, Mr. Secretary.
Councilmember Perez?
Aye.
Councilmember Carbone?
No.
Councilmember Reed?
Aye.
Councilmember Moore?
Aye.
Councilmember Little?
Aye.
Resolution 2017-116 was approved 4-1 with Councilmember Ordino absent from the chamber.
Okay. Let's move on our agenda to item 7, which provides an opportunity for the mayor council to issue regarding issues for future council agendas. Are there any items that you'd like to show up on the meeting?
I don't have a future agenda item, Mayor, but I'd like to acknowledge that this is the 1-year anniversary of our loss of Officer Ekpanya.
That's right.
So I just wanted to bring that up tonight. We're all with his, thinking of his wife and child, and we wish her well as we see her around the community quite often. But it was a tragic event for the City of Pearland and Pearland PD.
How did the memorial come out on that item? Was there?
You're speaking to the one at the Public Safety Building that's been designed?
Okay.
There's an strong effort to fundraise for that, and if people are interested, we can put you in touch with PPO is spearheading that fundraise, and we're working with them for the, I hope, installation as soon as we're able.
If you're not really familiar with this item, Officer Ingy was patrolling at night, and I'll say about 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning, I believe it was, and it was right down at Liberty Drive at 518, about where the bank is down there. If you drive by tonight, you'll see a little temporary memorial for him. And he was hit by a drunken driver and killed in his car, in a patrol car. And we've have plans to do a memorial for him as well as for other officers who have lost their lives during the service. And it's his wife, his young child, and it's been very sad for all of us to have one of our officers lose one, whether it be any of our first responders. It's always a very sad occasion. No other items on the agenda that you have? Now let me move to the executive session that we have under Texas Government Code Section 551.074 for personnel matters regarding the appointment of a community development director. Section 551.087 for consultation with the city attorney regarding economic development negotiations. And Section 551.071 for consultation with the city attorney regarding legal advice and interpretations associated with the city charter and city council procedures. Obviously, in the executive session, we discuss these items with staff, but we cannot make a decision in executive session. But upon return to open session, after we go through the discussion process, we will come back to open session for resolution of the items that we have discussed that require, which would be items 10 and 11 on our agenda. It's listed as 9 and 10, but it should be 10 and 11. So at this point, we will recess into executive session at 8:36. And I want to commend the students from Turner College for being here tonight. You can see we're kind of like a family. We have budgets. We do have requirements to take care of, and we've done a good job at that. Thank you. Council had returned from executive session at 9:19, moving to new business item number 10, consideration possible action regarding the appointment of Community Development Director.
Mayor, I'd like to make the motion to appoint John McDonald as the Community Development Director.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion on that item? Hearing none, Mr. Secretary, we have motion second.
Councilmember Carbone?
Aye.
Councilmember Reed?
Aye.
Councilmember Moore?
Aye.
Councilmember Little?
Aye.
Councilmember Perez?
Aye.
Motion passed 5-0 with Councilmember Ordino absent from the chambers.
Okay. Moving to executive session, item number 11, consideration possible action regarding legal advice and interpretation associated with the city charter and city council procedures. No action required on that item, okay? Consultation with city attorney regarding economic, well, that's it, but. No. Looking at the clock, it says 9:20, and my agenda says adjournment. We are adjourned at 9:20.